Dear Diary.
Dear Diary.
Dear Diary, wow, today was a really hard day.
Dear Diary, I find sometimes my life can be hard.
Dear Diary, it will pass and it will be okay.
Dear Diary, I feel like today is going to be...
Shh, the Indigo Diaries. Dear Diary, welcome world, and welcome to the Indigo Diaries, and welcome to the Series 1, The World Through Your Eyes, with me, Natasha Hickling. The Indigo Diaries podcast is one to learn about neurodivergence through our own and others' experience. I'm really, really excited to be back with our guest today. And I've not done Series 1 for like a year, which I'm really happy about. I started this podcast to have other people come and tell their story. And I've been getting into the experts world since I've become an ADHD coach, but I'm very, very excited for this guest today. So welcome, Kathleen.
Yeah.
So Kathleen Helm is late diagnosed ADHD of last year and self-diagnosed as autistic. They have been working with ADHD UK as an ambassador and an advocate for other neurodivergence. So, Kathleen, I'm really excited to hear your story. So, where do you want to start?
Yeah, so I guess when we had our first conversation about this, I was thinking about my story, and I think it's one that people have heard before, but I think it's one that's worth telling, and it's the story of a young girl, and I now identify as non-binary, but by then it was a young girl who was raised female, and the struggles that I faced and the being late diagnosed, how those struggles are all of a sudden make sense. And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to, and it's a story that I see time and time again with my friends, see time and time again in the ADHD UK support groups. And it's incredibly frustrating to hear the story over and over again, but also it's incredibly motivating to, feel like by telling my story and by addressing some of these things that we can help the next generation that's coming up. So yeah, I guess that's what I'm planning to talk about.
No, and like what you said there, I think that's really quite important, that it is validating when we hear these stories over and over again, but it's also just really sad because yet again, the generations that are coming and coming and coming, we're just not supporting and letting down. So I think it's very much the two sides of the coin.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is lack of information, and I think also misunderstanding and generalizations that get made around ADHD, and even around ADHD in women. For example, that women are more prone, or that women tend to have only the inattentive type and not the hyperactive, for example, and how hyperactivity can present differently, which it'd be good to talk about that stuff a little bit. But yeah, when you consider some of the statistics that we see, and it's truly horrible to think about. But when you think about the fact that 1 in 4 women with ADHD has attempted to take their own lives, and 1 in 10 men, when you think about those statistics and how avoidable that would be if the right information and the right education, and if people were given the right support and felt less alone, how avoidable that could be, and how much death there has been that people still don't understand why their sisters, mothers, daughters, and then also not wanting to exclude other genders as well. When you think about the number of people who don't understand where that came from, and that person never had the language or the knowledge to verbalize what they were feeling. So I guess I'm really keen to share my experience, and if people can relate to that, then they might be able to see that they're not alone in those feelings, and that there is a tribe of people. And I think that's one thing that I want to really touch on, is how, there's this tribe of people that are kind of waiting for these new people to come in, and once you find that tribe, how much that helps. So it's really shocking.
It is really shocking, and like you said there, all those people that get missed, but we can tell our stories, and hopefully the young ones of today, or the mums, or whatever, or dads, whatever it is, the parents, whatever that is, they can then make changes, and then hopefully after a while the butterfly effect will work, and that we won't be getting to 35, 30, 40 years old and then having to almost figure out our whole lives.
Yeah, and unlearn a lot of things and then rewrite ourselves basically, and educate everyone around us as well. But I think that's the thing as well, is that there is as much as it's really tragic and it's really painful to think about all of those lost lives and all those people that are really struggling and still struggling and don't have access to this information. There's a lot of hope as well, because there are a lot of people that are raising awareness about these things, people like yourself for this podcast, people at ADHD UK, and I feel like we're really making progress now. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that these numbers will get better.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So tell us about kind of when, or wherever you want to start, but when did ADHD come into your life? You know,
yeah. So it might be good to start at about a year ago, 2 years ago, in fact. Start about 2 years ago, and then go back to childhood, because for me that was kind of how the process worked. Sorry. So a couple of years ago now, I had a lot of change in my life. I'd moved house. My dad had just had a cardiac arrest, which fortunately survived, and he's doing very well considering. I went through a nasty breakup. I had a lot of stress at work, and I was in a really bad place. Really bad. I think if my dad hadn't survived that cardiac arrest, I wouldn't have survived this. And I was speaking to a friend about the way that I was feeling about the breakup and the very physical feeling in my chest, and the amount of confusion and pain that I felt around it. And it definitely wasn't a healthy relationship. It was good that it ended at the end of the day, but obviously in the moment I wasn't feeling that way. And that friend was diagnosed with ADHD and autism. And they said to me, that sounds like reductive sensitivity dysphoria. I was like, what the hell is that? So they said it's a symptom of ADHD. And of course, my instinctive reaction to that was, I've got ADHD, which I think is something that a lot of people may think if somebody throws that at them. And of course, much to my shame, my knowledge of ADHD was very much the cliche story of the little boy chucking rubbers at little girls' heads in the classroom, and very much gendered in that way as well. I think I knew that women could have ADHD, but in my head that was the picture that was painted. Yeah. And similarly with autism, I did know that the spectrum included some variety, but very much on the thinking of, Big Bang Theory and Sherlock Holmes and, these genius characters are these very non-verbal characters that you see on the TV, because that's the story we've been told at the end.
That's the stereotype. Yeah, that's the painter, the picture that's been painted for these things.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I knew nothing, and my friend said this to me, and obviously I started going into the TikToks and the Instagrams and going into all of those sources, and I think those have a place. They're a helpful entry tool, I think, for people who are looking for answers. And then I started diving a bit deeper and reading about things like masking and reading about things like time blindness and all of these things, and the pieces started falling into place. And I think this is a very familiar story for a lot of people. So with a lot of gaslighting myself, I was slowly sort of coming around to the idea that this might actually be the reality. And up to that point, I had known that there was something. And before now, people had kind of proposed it autism, but I was too high functioning, that's in air quotes, too high functioning for me to think that was something worth pursuing. Yeah. But yeah, I'd always struggled with my mental health, and basically, I think to summarize my mental health through the 30 years before I was diagnosed, I think the thing that I would say is that since about the age of 7 or 8, I knew there was one thing that I was sure of. There was one thing I had total belief and faith in. I absolutely knew for certain that I would take my own life at some point. And I didn't know when. It wasn't that I was thinking it'd be next week or next month or even 6 months or 6 years. But I knew that was how it would happen, because I felt so, sorry, getting a bit emotional.
No, you were good.
I felt so alone, and I felt so uncomfortable and desperate and confused that it felt like there was nothing that could fix it. And I would cry for help. I would, when I found the strength to, I would tell people about how upset I was. And obviously you get sent to the doctors and you get different anxiety meds, or put on talking therapies, or told to do some positive psychology, which has its place. But and this is a story as well that my best friend, and I now know why we were best friends, it's because we had this shared experience.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But my best friend that I made in high school, I've been friends with for, I'd say really good friends for over 15 years, but known for 20 odd. This is something that she's felt, and a lot of women that I've spoken to especially have also felt. So yeah, like, to sum up my mental health, I knew I was going to kill myself, which for an 8-year-old to know that is, yeah. And I'd looked at all of the diagnoses online, and none of them had ever really fit. And I assumed that either one of them did, and I just was rubbish at reading the stuff, and I just couldn't figure it out. And of course, you're never going to get to see a psychiatrist in the NHS, let's face it.
Let's not open that can of worms.
No, well, I'll end up going on a rant if we do. Or that there was nothing wrong with me, and I was just shit at life. I was just a shit person. And obviously you internalise all of that self-hatred, and it affects everything you do. And you become a perfectionist and a people pleaser, and you full of imposter syndrome and all the rest of it. So yeah, out of the blue, because I explained about this feeling of rejection, and a friend said RSD, symptom of ADHD, I started going down that wormhole. And I didn't want to hope that it could be correct, because I was like, I can't fool myself again that I've potentially found the answer, because I'd been searching for a solution for so long. So I didn't want to hope. And then, having been gaslit for a lot of my life, I was like, no, you're just twisting it to make it fit your story. Like, oh yeah, you relate into that, but it's only because you're so desperate for an explanation that you're twisting it to make it sound right. And no, actually, you're not that sensitive to sensory things, and the other people are much more sensitive, and the level that you're sensitive to sensory things is totally normal, and you're just twisting it because you're desperate to have this label and to be special. And all of these toxic thoughts that we all get thrown at us as ADHDers all the time is, oh, you just want a label. So yeah, I told myself all of these things, but eventually I kind of booked up the courage and called my GP. And first thing my GP asked was, how do you do at school?
That's always the first question.
Yeah. To which I because at that point I'd started getting involved with the ADHD UK support groups and stuff, and I'd done quite a bit of reading, because obviously I had to, in order to persuade myself to even try and do this. It kind of got my back up a bit, and I went, well, that's irrelevant, because it's nothing to do with intelligence, and there are other ways to pass exams than to like have good concentration skills. So actually I did quite well at school, not as well as I should have done, but objectively I did quite well. And I really kind of like got a bit arsey with it, to be honest with you. But after I'd said that, I'd gone on a bit of a rant and said about, and actually, you know, women present differently and blah, 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 masculine, blah, 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 for about 3 minutes. My GP is very patient with me. I've got to give him credit for that. He said, well, to be honest, I don't really know anything about ADHD. I was like, oh, there it is. So he agreed to refer me, and
Good.
I ended up going private in the end because I was so desperate for answers.
Yeah.
Because I just needed to know whether I was feeling myself, and I needed to either let go of this light at the end of the tunnel, this hope, or be able to embrace it and accept it, because the doubt was so uncomfortable. And my process involved having like an hour-long interview with somebody. A report came back from that, and it was very much saying all these traits of ADHD. I'd spoken about my childhood and such. And then I'm conscious I'm probably going on a bit too long, Natasha.
No, keep going.
Yeah, came back with all these traits in the report. I did a QB test, which came back, I was like in the 99th percentile chance of having it. And then I had my final appointment with a psychiatrist, which was the person that would actually give me the diagnosis. And it's quite funny, actually, because even having had that report back and such, I was still very much in the you probably feeling yourself camp. And I was so nervous for that appointment. And this is something, again, that I see time and time again from people coming to support groups, is how anxious they are about trying to get this validation.
Yeah, because if they say no, if they say no, you don't have it, then it's okay, so is it me? Have I done something wrong? Am I broken? And I think that fear that it's not an answer, there's no answer, then well, where have you got to go? You've got to look at it through yourself. It's so incredibly hard to deal with.
Yeah, I think as well, the other problem with that as well is there are psychiatrists who aren't well informed, who
I agree,
who will miss people that should be diagnosed, and I think it's less likely with a psychiatrist, but even before you get to the psychiatrist, you need to speak to your GP, and GPs are very, as a rule, not all, but as a rule, GPs tend to have a lot of cliche opinions, or very strong opinions, especially because of the fact that more people are getting diagnosed and they see it as like a TikTok trend or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is just so frustrating, because of course it's TikTok and Instagram have played a role, but it's at the end of the day it comes down to the fact that ADHD hasn't been recognised.
The system has been what's wrong, not as
and the system is finally starting to catch up, and a lot of especially older women that are getting diagnosed now are being diagnosed because their children are spotted in school, because the systems are in place now. They start learning about it, they recognise the symptoms, they learn there's a genetic link, and then they're like, oh God, this is the explanation for all of the suffering and pain that I've been through. And then they go for and seek diagnosis, and by that point, having learned about it on behalf of the children, they'll know more about it than their GP will. 99% of the time anyway. So to those people, I guess that's just a bit of a message out there for everyone. Like, to those people who have spent hours hyper-focusing, researching ADHD, learning about it through the children, or whoever else, just when you go to your GP, go armed with that knowledge, and go armed with the fact that there's a very, very high chance that your GP knows far less than you, especially when you consider how little mental health training GPs have to do.
I always say go in prepared, go in with evidence, go in with stuff, and because unfortunately that's the system we're in. So you got so what happened when you went to your last appointment?
So I spoke for a while. He asked me some questions about like whether things had been there in childhood, and about sleep and whatnot. And then in the last 10 minutes of the hour, he said, right, so I think we'll start you on methylphenidate. And I was sat there like, what? You saying I've got it? Just hang on, you're saying I've got it? I just he didn't actually say it. He was just like, right, medication. And he's like, oh yeah, no, you've got it. And I'm like, oh my God. And then even then, until I tried the medication, I was very lucky that the first one I tried actually worked for me, because
Yeah.
that's very validating. So yeah, the methylphenidate worked for me, which is very lucky, because many people just don't have a reaction to others. I tried Elvance, it did nothing for me. Mentioning brand names on your podcast, is that allowed? But yeah, I was very lucky, and it was only when it worked for me that I accepted it, which was nearly a year after my friend had suggested it. So
yeah, so it took a while
to
get to that point.
I very much thought that would take 5 minutes, and it took a lot longer than I thought. Apologies.
No, you're all good. But we are going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to go deep into childhood. But I also think it's important to take the time, because that process of diagnosis is sometimes even more important than a lot of other things, because that's the pivotal thing where things start to change and you start to get light.
You start to get what? Sorry, what was
So I
that?
start to get light. Things start to see. Yeah. I mean, there is darkness with it as well, of course, but you start to get answers and things for who you are and who.
And I don't think people realise how much of obviously it's traumatic enough growing up with neurodivergence, but then it's traumatic to have that switch.
Yeah.
And to realise that your brain is different. As much as it's a relief to have the answer, it's also, you have to adjust your entire way of thinking about your entire life and challenge every way that you've ever thought about things. And with any trauma, you also end up having kind of like a grieving process, and you get angry. You go, why didn't my school, my parents, me, my doctors, why did nobody spot this? Like I could have, like, all of that pain that I've been through, all of like those nasty relationships and breakups and eating disorders and whatever else people have dealt with, that didn't need to happen. But you and then you get really sad, because you think about how you, all that pain, and you think you're like, oh my god, like this was so unnecessary. And then eventually you come to acceptance and you start seeing a future. But you even bargaining, you accept the diagnosis, and then you go back to going, oh no, this can't be, blah, blah, blah.
And I don't think it ever changes really. I still think even now, like I've been diagnosed 5-6 years, and still now I'm a bit like, days where it just all goes wrong, I'm still like, wait, do I really oh no I do it's still now, and I still think these
both of you as well, like that's it's extraordinary how much like that early thinking like has really it's very difficult to get rid of.
It's hard, and it's hard to change it, and it is hard to grow from it. But we're going to dive back into your childhood after the break.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. If you would like any more information on Indigo Hub or our Indigo support group, then please check out our website below, or our link to our social media platforms, or email at indigohub.adhd@gmail.com. If you would like to offer any comments, feedback, get support, or if you're interested in the world hearing your story, then please reach out through any of our avenues. As said before, have a positive week. Check in again later. And we're out. Shh, the Indigo Diaries. And we're back. And before the break, we were talking to Kathleen. But if you've joined now, then I don't know why. We're Ryan now, and this is Kathleen. And we were talking about their experience with ADHD, getting diagnosed. And now we're going to dive straight in to their childhood. So, Kathleen, where do you want to start?
Good question. And I think one of the challenging things for this, and it's something that I've heard from a lot of people with ADHD and or autism, is that we often don't remember a lot. I don't know if that's working memory or if that's trauma, but I guess I'll talk about what I do remember and what I've been told by my mum and dad. So I remember absolutely hating school. I loathed school. And I don't think I know anybody who's neurodivergent who didn't.
No.
no. And I touched on it in the first section, but I felt I was so lonely and isolated and did not understand people my age. My mum tells me that when I was in primary school, I think in primary school there's a point where boys and girls start hanging out only with each other and start being like, oh, boys and girls have got cuties and all that kind of rubbish.
Kiss chase and all that. Yeah.
So I think it was around year 4 or 5, which is like 9 or 10, when everybody started splitting off into boys and girls, and the boys that I've been playing with, and you know, running around with, probably getting some of the hyperactivity out, stopped playing with me. So I started to make friends with the girls, and my mum said that I came home from school and I was like, oh, the girls are like, I just don't understand the girls, like they just want to talk about hair and bobbles and like clothes and makeup, and it's so boring, and I want to talk about ancient Egypt. And
brilliant.
So yeah, these are some of the classic autistic traits, I suppose you could say, coming out, which is that when I was a kid I used to consume books about ancient Egypt, and like I remember, because they teach you about it in history to try and get you interested in history, because it's one of the more interesting civilizations, I guess you could say. Teach you about it in primary school, don't they? And I remember my teachers talking about it and me going, well, actually, to most things that she said. Actually, slaves didn't build the pyramids, and well, the reason that the brain wasn't considered important is because whatever. So yeah, and yeah, so I had some special interest back then. I couldn't relate to any of my peers, and I just kept making silly social mistakes as well. Like I remember I couldn't empathize with people, and I don't think it's that I lack empathy, I just that my way of addressing things was much more practical. And it's that thing of sometimes when somebody is upset about something, they don't want advice, they just want you to listen.
Yes.
And I was very much like, advice and where's the logic here, and trying to logic emotions, and doesn't win your friends.
No, it doesn't win, you know.
No, when your friend's upset because that boy ignored them or whatever else, and you're going, well, maybe they were just distracted.
Yeah, or maybe they don't like you.
Like, why do you care about this anyway? Like, you're at 8 years old. It's not like you're gonna marry him. Like, why do you care? Yeah.
Shall we do something else?
Yeah, exactly. Why are we talking about this anyway? Yeah. Like, you're 7. So yeah, it doesn't win your friends. I remember once somebody telling me that another girl I was stood in the queue to go into the classroom in the playground, and this girl was telling me that another girl had been bullying her, and in my attempt to empathize and be helpful, I said, oh well, no, I think you should be really proud of yourself, because if she'd said that to me, I would have slapped her. Which wasn't necessarily true. I don't know, I might have done, but it wasn't necessarily true. But then, of course, what she did was go and slap her. And then when the teacher said, why did you slap her? She said, well, Kathleen told me to.
Oh, gosh.
I was like, I didn't tell you to. I was saying you were good for not
doing it.
Yeah. Actually, just a funny one that's just sprung to mind. It's not that funny because it bloody hurt, but I remember that they used to teach you stuff. I was a right teacher's pet, and the teachers used to have this rule that when you're in the playground and they blew the whistle, you have to freeze.
Yeah.
And then they blow it again, and you all went into your queues and you went into the school. And I was playing tag, and they blew the whistle, and I was just about to tag somebody. So I was like in running mode. I was on one foot, blew the whistle, and I guess this is like black and white literal thinking.
Yeah.
And I stopped. I froze. And I was on one foot. So obviously, like reaching out, I toppled into them after about, it's kind of like that cartoon thing where somebody like runs off a cliff and there's a moment.
Yeah, there's a moment before they fall, yeah.
So I did that and knocked two of my teeth out, grazed both my knees, had a massive scratch along my face.
But it was literally as though, that's what I got to stop. So you stopped.
Yeah, they said freeze, so I've got to take that literally. Yeah. So yeah, but very lonely, and I think by the year 6 I had got to the point where I'd given up and become very so that's final year of primary school. I'd given up and had become very protective, to the point that I would, in lunchtime, for example, I would sit on at the same bench every day and I would watch people and I would not talk and I would just stare at people. And obviously people thought I was weird, but I would like literally glare them down so they wouldn't come near me.
Yeah.
And one time there's this girl that came and spoke to me, and to be honest, she was a bit of a is it sycophant the right word? You know, so the kind of person that like changes their personality and like she, you know, I've been that person as well, but like clinged on to whoever's popular or whatever.
Yeah.
For some reason today she decided that she was going to work on me. Came over and started trying to speak to me, and I was just like, yeah. And eventually she'd been doing it for about 20 minutes and I couldn't, because I didn't know her agenda.
Yeah, you didn't know what she wanted.
Yeah, and it was unsettling me. I told her to fuck off. Yeah, but of course, like I seemed like this impenetrable wall of like, some people found it cool and some people just thought I was like a bitch. And I carried this on to high school as well. Total teacher's pet. And people just thought I was like this just total stonewall, but I would go home and just sob into my pillow for hours. Because yeah, I was so lonely, but I couldn't. I tried reaching out to people and it just hurt.
Yeah, and the thing is, you never. I always say people look, you know, it's the thing about ADHD with what, you know, we look fine on the outside. We may seem okay or seem like this, but you don't know what happens behind closed doors. You don't know the feeling or why we're doing that. And that's why I think people, so important to look beneath the surface.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard for in regards to children for doctors and teachers was, if a child is exhibiting extremes in any regard, like over speaking, under speaking, overly social, underly social, over intelligent, low intelligence, like any regard, over empathetic, no empathy, whatever, do some more investigation. Yeah. Because that's what we tend to go to extremes all the time. And I think kind of going into high school, that what happened was I continued that trend, and and the perfectionism came out a lot more as well, because it was like there was one place where I could get validation, and that was from teachers. Yeah. Except, of course, because it became expected of me, and I was, you know, in all the top sets and stuff. And I don't say that as a humble brag, but I needed it. It was so expected that it was like the validation was like less, because it was just, that was my standard. So I needed to do more and more and more.
So then perfectionism came in and you pushed yourself beyond what was capable or what you needed to do for yourself.
Yeah. And I already think like the level of homework and stuff that people get in school nowadays is ridiculous. But it's like something that I could have done in half an hour. If I hadn't been a perfectionist, I would spend 3 hours on it. And then if I didn't get the validation, then I would feel the rejection, and
so you would spend 4 hours.
And then the next time I'd be like, I've got to do more.
Yeah.
So I was exhausting myself, and I was masking heavily to keep up this protective facade, because I couldn't show any vulnerability because I would be bullied, basically. I had no friends and no one that lived near me. I had some struggles at home as well, probably because like some neurodivergence in my parents, and you know, managing a neurodivergent child is difficult, and like it doesn't remove some of the bad things that happen, like, you know, people should be held accountable for things, but I, you know, also there was difficulties and things like my dad's health and stuff like that. So all of this stuff, and you know, I would go home from school and I would crash and fall asleep because I was so sensory overwhelmed and so emotionally overwhelmed. And then there would be arguments in the house, and then I would use the evening. I would like stay awake till like 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning, get shouted at, obviously. But because it was the only time that was a break from all of that. My mum got calls and letters from, is it truancy? You know, when you low attendance, because quite often I would wake up and I would be in so much dread and fear about going into school and dealing with another day of that I felt unwell, and I would tell my mum that I felt unwell, and I would fake at times, but I did feel unwell. Like, I would say that I felt sick, and I would, you do that classic faking being sick thing, because I knew I needed to prove myself.
Yeah, you have to always prove yourself, always go beyond. It's the same thing as the perfectionism, isn't it?
Yeah. Because otherwise I wasn't gonna get off. But like I did feel sick.
Yeah.
I felt nauseous. And yeah, so my mum would just, like, most of the time having to drag me to school, which would have been hard on her. And took me to the doctors. Obviously they, didn't really do anything.
No, of course not.
And as a result of years of that, aside from like the emotional and psychological trauma and stress from that, I also developed chronic pain. So then, it got to the point where eventually, like, I don't think I was that old, probably like 13 or something. I would wake up in the morning and be in extreme pain.
Yeah.
So I've got fibromyalgia, and I believe I had it back then. It wasn't diagnosed, but like every time I went to the doctors, it's growing pains.
Yeah. Excuses because of lack of knowledge.
Are you eating properly? Oh, it sounds like you're anxious. Whatever, like, else. And nobody, again, another stress for teachers and parents and doctors. The child has chronic pain. Check to see if there might be a mental health cause.
Yeah.
So yeah, it developed into chronic pain, and up until last year, at the age of 30, 29, when the friend mentioned, and I got diagnosed at the age of 30, started my medication, started being able to pay attention to my body more, because my brain was quite up until the age of 30, I didn't know where that chronic pain was coming from.
Wow.
And I spent high school and college and university and, early years of my career and etc. Struggling through that pain to do whatever I could, losing friends because I was letting them down, feeling I couldn't participate in activities with my peers, like, going to music festivals or staying out dancing or whatever. And it massively reduced my quality of life. And I still have chronic pain, but it's improved massively, because now I'm able to manage my stress and my sensory input, because I can listen to it, and I know about its existence. But I literally spent 17 years not knowing why what felt like my body was betraying me, when actually it was my body screaming at me that something was wrong. And I couldn't listen to it because my brain was just like all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of my high school experience. And again, not humble brag, but school was easy. Like, and the thing is I loved learning, and I hated school.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just going to make a note there. Like, I see it with my kids and my kids that I work with, and my teenagers, that you see them, like, they love when you talk about actual learning and going down rabbit holes of research.
Yeah.
And they get so excited. But then when you talk about school, it's just like, no, I hate school. Teachers are crap. And that's the thing. It's because of the way the environment is done, we lose that spark.
Yeah.
When all it is just a different way.
And the thing is as well, is you get to a point when there's trauma around education in general, that like you even lose that passion for it that you used to have in your spare time. That 7-year-old that used to consume books about ancient Egypt, you lose that because you get a trauma around education, and you end up just seeking relief from it all the time instead, when actually you realize that when you start having conversations with somebody about this stuff, that actually there's so much passion there. So not only did I lose that love of education and learning, I also lost a lot of things that were like important, and like hobbies and like things that I loved. And then on top of that, of course, because I developed this perfectionism and this sense of trauma, because like you spend a long time on something, you wear yourself out, there was already too much homework anyway. The day was already too traumatizing anyway. And then the expectation level was so high because I was gifted and talented. Which I kind of hate gifted and talented programs a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. The expectation was so high that I never like got enough recognition. That I was never good enough, and that internalized that. So that made like even starting something difficult, because it was never, no matter like whenever I started, it was never going to be good enough. So why bother?
What's the point? And then that's where it gets to that point of, I don't care. I don't care anymore. And that's the thing I'm just seeing from your story. It's just, well, what we're going to call it is the lost generation, but it's just the fact that you were just lost, trying to seek answers, and just never had them until recently.
And all it would have been one person who knew
to look deeper,
to look for, just spotting one of the many signs, which I can see so clearly now. One person spotting one of those and just throwing the question out there, so that somebody, my mum, my dad, somebody did some research and sent me down the right path, and my whole life could have been different. Like, I thought the gifted and talented and the top set stuff, like I'm not sure I would have been a good fit for Oxford or Cambridge, but like they were talking about me, about what I could achieve in like Oxford and Cambridge and all A's and A stars and all of this sort of stuff, and I didn't get there. And I did well. Like I did much better than the average. And that's the thing, is that a GP looking at my average grades, there's no reason to think I had ADHD. But basically what I did was I'd never revised a day in my life. I've never, ever revised, because I can't do it. I find it too difficult. It upsets me. But I am very good at applying logic. So when I get asked a question in an exam or whatever, I'm quite good at finding the solution without actually knowing the answers. Like I've kind of got a general knowledge of many things, and then I'm like, well, if that makes sense, and then this must mean this. And I'm really good at that. I'm really good at problem solving, which a lot of us are. And that is the thing that I've coasted through my education on. But I know if I'd been medicated, if I'd been able to apply myself, if I hadn't had this trauma around things, if I'd been supported, when I think about what I could have achieved. And I'm not saying that as a humble brag. I know how much potential was wasted, and I see it time and time again. My best friend is incredible. She's genius, and she studied like everything from science to like, and chemistry and like been like finding solutions for diabetes and stuff, and to like being an incredible poet and actor and the most empathetic, wonderful person. And she works in mental health now, and obviously mental health, like she works for a charity, you're never going to make a great living and stuff. And she's got her own challenges, and she's in, she's struggling with money and things. And it's like, you could have been so much happier. You could have given so much more to the world. Like she really does give a lot. Like she's saving lives basically. But you know, she could have been writing academic papers that could have transformed things. She, incredible human being who's like, her mental health struggles were much more apparent than mine as well. Like she was very much like under all the services as a child, and I wasn't so much under those things. Partially, actually, funny enough, because my grandma had a stigma against these things and didn't want me to be labelled. But yeah, the things that she could have done, and I hope she gets there still. But even now with working in mental health and with all of this knowledge, and even now, like, it's difficult for her to get support and be helped. So 20 years ago, she had no chance.
All of this if we'd just been found.
Yeah.
And as cheesy as that sounds, it's very accurate.
But that means it's our job to do that for the next group.
Yeah. And that's why we're here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we're kind of wrapping up here, what are you kind of, before we go into the quote and stuff, what are you kind of thoughts are coming up as we're kind of finishing here? It's a big question.
Yeah. I think, you know, it harks back to what I was saying around grief earlier, which is that there's all of the sensations of grief are present. So I'm sad when I think about my friend and I think about what I could have done, and I'm angry that it happened, and I'm angry that it's still happening, and I'm bargaining and being like, what can I do? What more can I do? And I'm accepting in that things are changing and we're making progress. And I've forgotten what the other one is, but the 5 stages. But yeah, I think all of those feelings of grief are there, but it's also fairly leveled and like, you know, I've more come to terms with this now. And I think a year ago, I wouldn't think I'd be in the place I am now. And this last year has been a lot of growth and a lot of learning. And I just want more people to be able to have this experience, because I think that's, you know, again, harking back, the big thing to touch on is, since I got diagnosed and started medication, that one universal truth, that one belief that I had since 7 or 8 years old, that I would take my own life, gone. And that hope is incredible and confusing and strange, but it's amazing, and I just want more people to have it. Yeah,
I think that's just a really strong, I get a bit emotional, but strong but also real thing of if you know, people are found early or are found, because that's all it is. It's as simple as someone looking deeper.
One sentence.
Oh,
that was a bit ADHD.
Yeah, one diagnosis, one thing that can change our lives. And I know it's not my quote, but can I share something that I saw on social media last night that I just loved?
Yeah.
Someone said, "You don't understand why a diagnosis means so much to us. But that's because you didn't go your entire life wondering why you were different and being excluded, shamed and mocked and misunderstood because of it. Diagnosis literally saved my life."
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah, I saw that last night, and I thought I'd bring that.
Yeah. And there's a common quote that gets used, of course, is, why do people need diagnosis? Because it's helpful to know that you're a zebra and not a broken horse.
Yeah. And what quote are you leaving us with?
So I'm going to leave you a quote, which is something that I realised by getting myself involved with the ADHD UK support groups. First of all, just by going, to all of the lost and lonely people out there, the most important thing you will ever do is to find your tribe. This tribe is waiting for you. We are growing in strength and numbers, and like any tribe, we all have a role to play. Healers, creatives, warriors, we support each other. We support you, and we are here for you.
Wow. Did you write that? That's even better because it's from you. Yeah, but I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah,
I made myself a bit emotional by saying that then. But yeah, if somebody said that to me when I was a little girl,
yeah,
I don't think I would believe them. But
no, but we needed the hope, and the hope that there is better and that there is more. Yeah. And wow, okay, I'm speechless for one of the first podcasts.
Even
that is an achievement. Yeah, it is an achievement. I don't. I just think it's so important what we're doing here, and I think it's just so important what going forward. And just I cannot thank you enough for coming.
Thank you. And honestly, I've had a very difficult couple of weeks personally, and it's really helpful to re-engage with my drive and purpose and my tribe. You being part of that tribe. And to speak to the tribe that's out there listening and re-engage with that is really valuable to me. So I think this couldn't have come at a better time for me personally as well. So
good. Yeah. And I think it will come at a better time for a lot of people, because trust me, I mean, I can relate to this, but how many people will be able to? And Kathleen, we will be getting back, because she came to me the first and gave me loads of these ideas, and I was like, okay, we need to do more. We need to do more. They will be back in series 3 to be an expert, and I'm really excited for that.
And I am too, and thank you. It's been really helpful, and I hope others are helped. So thank you so much, Natasha.
No worries. And we hope you come back, learn and listen through the world through not my eyes, but neurodivergence eyes, because that's what we need to do. We need to see the world through our own eyes and see that we can be found, and there is hope.
Thank you.
And we're out.
Dear diary.
Dear diary.
Dear diary.
Today is ending. I'll check in again tomorrow.
Tomorrow is a brand new beginning.
Good night, sweet dreams.
I think tomorrow will be...
Shh.